Good morning, everyone. I am super excited today to talk about regenerative agroforestry, particularly in fruit production and orchards. There is this amazing farm you probably have never heard of called Frog Hollow Farm, who is just doing the best at regenerative organic production and building soil health and doing a lot of amazing stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about their farm and how they're just changing the landscape of fruit production.
All right, great. So Frog Hollow Farm was established in 1976. So we're in our 48th year of growing fruit here in the Great Central Valley of California. We've got a great climate here, great soil, great terroir. We're farming. We started out with 13 acres in 1976. We're now farming 280 acres. And we specialize in tree fruit, especially stone fruit like peaches, nectarines, cherries, plums, and apricots. We're well known for our peaches, but actually we think that our apricots are amongst the best in the world, as are our pluots, the flavored king pluot and the dapple dandy pluot. So we've been farming regeneratively for a long, long time, ever since we really started going organic, which was like 35 years ago. But we didn't call it regenerative farming back in those days. We just called it organic farming. So that includes cover crops, that includes building the soil with compost, that includes very minimal tillage. Rachel, what would you add to that?
Integrated pest management. So instead of relying only on, chemical control to combat pests, we're also thinking about biological control and cultural control. So physical removal of diseased wood or releasing predator species that predate on our pests, or putting in owl boxes to eat the gophers, which can kill young orchards from the bottom up. Pest management, cover crops, focus on pollinators, building over 3,000 tons of compost every year at the farm. So everything that comes out of our packing shed that we can't use in our commercial kitchen. So we do make jams and pastries with blemished fruit and overripe fruit, but fruit that's too banged up to even be used in that kitchen, we use it in our compost. So we're mixing that fruit with wood chips from our winter pruning that we chip up from the trees, manure from local horse stables, spent coffee grounds from Blue Bottle Coffee. We pick up a truckload every week, shredded cardboard, mix it all together and spread it back onto the orchards that it came from.
So how many tons of compost are you making? Because that has to be astronomical amounts.
Over 3,000 tons a year.
Yeah.
And we apply it at the rate of 10 tons to the acre on all 380 acres.
Correct.
So just a little bit of a compost farm that happens to make fruit kind of thing, right? So tell me about, you guys were doing this so long before it had this beautiful title, regenerative farming. And we kind of now get that, but tell me kind of those early stages.
I was inspired by an Austrian family who came to Eco Farm and presented to the larger organic audience. Yeah. They presented how they were making compost, and they were doing it scientifically. And Amigo Bob Condesano was the one that brought him over here. I'm trying to remember the names of the family, but it was a beautiful Austrian family. The next year, I went to Austria and spent a week on their farm learning how they were doing it and seeing the results. And by the way, that was like right after Chernobyl that they became famous, because the farms all around them were being affected by Chernobyl fallout, but their farm was still thriving and vigorous and green and unfazed by that by the nuclear fallout from Chernobyl. So they became world famous, and that was the thing that really inspired me to start making compost. And then we of course, I've been selling fruit at the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market for over 30 years. About 25 years ago, we started making pastry. We opened a shop there in the Ferry Building, and my wife is a gifted pastry chef. And so we had a young couple. They weren't that young, but and they would come to our shop every Saturday morning, and they were our biggest and best and most loyal pastry customers. They're both French. And so they discovered that our pastries were as good as you could find anywhere in Europe, anywhere in France. So they were loyal customers, and we became friends. And several years later, I was approached by Christophe, and he said, that he wanted to come out to the farm and see the operation and just kind of get a feel for how we did things out here. So we did, spent a half a day together looking around. And he says, well, I've got a proposal for you. He says, my wife and I have just been studying under Elaine Ingham, her soil food web. That was one of my other inspirations, by the way, was the soil food web. I began to realize, and by the way, Elaine Ingham was one of the other early presenters at that Eco Farm. That's where I first met her, was at the Eco Farm conference. They were pros, they were scientists, they knew what they were doing. They wanted to start a compost production operation here at Frog Hollow Farm. That was exciting to me, and I having been to the farm in the Lubke farm, Lubke. Having been to the Lubke farm, I thought that this is going to be a great opportunity. So we started, Christophe and I started experimenting with making compost. Our first pile was 4 feet high and 3 feet in diameter.
Humble beginnings.
It was a chicken wire. Humble beginnings, and we didn't have any equipment whatsoever. So fast forward, now we've spent at least couple $100,000 on equipment. We've been paying Christophe and Monique consulting fees for the past 15 or 20 years, and they're still monitoring our compost piles and for moisture and for temperature and for bacterial and fungal content. They pretty much run the compost operation still. Yeah, it's been a journey, and now it's like we're really excited about our compost operation. The quality of it is highly fungal, and we want to keep it fungal because, according to Elaine Ingham, that's what trees like. Trees like fungal compost. If you're growing tomatoes or onions or carrots, you want bacterially dominated compost. So I think we've noticed a difference in our fruit. I mean, we think it's sweeter than ever now, and Rachel keeps very good track of our sugar content of every pick of fruit that we do throughout the summer. She does Brix analysis every time we start picking a fruit, and we don't pick it until it has a certain level of Brix.
I was going to ask you if you had any high tangibility about nutritional content, Brix monitoring. What have you seen?
Yeah, Rachel, you want to comment on that?
Well, I only have Brix data from the last 5 years, so I can't actually say, how the sweetness compares to before the compost program started. But I can say that our sugar levels are extremely high, and what we do, something that we have measured change on, similar but different, is the carbon storage in soils that we've converted from conventional annual cropland. So neighbors that used to grow conventional tomatoes near us all bought that land and planted trees on. And since then, we've been measuring the change in the soil profile every year. So we're actually seeing increases in total organic carbon in some of these blocks that started off, as heavily tilled, heavy use of synthetic inputs, heavy extracted, crops every year, big crops every year, same thing grown every year.
Completely, no cover crop whatsoever. Everything was always clean cultivated, 365 days a year.
Those blocks that he started, he planted trees on in 2017 and 2018. We have baseline soil data from before planting and then every year since. So now I think it's our 6th year of data, and we're seeing that increase, which is really exciting.
What's your range on your increase? Do you have any general percentages?
Yeah, actually, from the first year in this one orchard, Get Us 18, up until now, it's jumped from I think it's grown 90% up to hovering around, we're now at 28 tons of carbon per acre. And when we started, it was under 10 there.
I think that's something people worry about is where is it coming from? What is being compromised in the cycle? And I think what's so neat about you guys looking at this entire thing is, well, nothing's being compromised because the circle keeps going round and round and nothing gets compromised at the end. So tell me a little bit about that beautiful circle, because you mentioned owl boxes to pest control, just kind of it's your high level circular.
It's really fun and interesting to watch all of these different strategies that we use, to watch the fulfillment of them, to find out that they really do work. And there's reasons why some of these strategies have been used for centuries by farmers for all over the world, but the organic community here in America has focused on some of these ancient practices and discovered that they really do work. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen any decline in production. Matter of fact, we're seeing increases in our production overall. So on a per acre basis of fruit pick per variety per acre. Better production, better quality, better storage, better keeping qualities, by the way, because it's got more sugar. Yeah. Sugar is like a preservative, and it tastes better. So, I mean, the bottom line is people love to eat it. That gives us a lot of joy.
Yeah. Something else worth mentioning, Al invests so much in the practices that he does, in the compost operation and hand picking, hand pruning. Tree team is working year round to produce one piece of fruit. This winter, we had extreme amounts of rain here, 30 inches compared to 9. And what we saw in our neighborhood was that a lot of the almond orchards nearby that have heavily tilled, heavily compacted soil were experiencing standing water. Like trunks were, had completely wet feet, like a, foot above ground, just sitting in water. We didn't have any standing water in our orchards. So all of those practices that he's been investing in for years, really, it was clear the value of all of those things that we do, and the system is resilient. And this kind of validates why we do things the way we do when there's an extreme climate event, and we are able to actually just keep that water in the soil as a sponge and then use it later in the season. Like we've started irrigating later, we're irrigating less this summer because of that. That was really amazing to see, and just kind of like proof.
For people who are not familiar with the almonds, that the ground just doesn't absorb water because of the chemicals and everything. I had no idea, like this happened to almond orchards. So I'll do the aside that the water doesn't seep into the ground and it just sits, like you said. And when you guys took photos, it wasn't there because your ground absorbed things. And not only did it absorb, it held, right? Like, so you got to not only like use that water, but to keep that water for longer spans because of the carbon level. So, and I think it's also terrifying that we're like, okay, there's places, acres and acres where the ground doesn't absorb water because of farming practices. And that kind of just freaks me out, like on its own aside. So I thought that was just such an amazing comparison.
Oh yeah, pretty dramatic, Lauren. Here, we didn't even start irrigating until late June. The only trees we irrigated in May were the ones that we had just recently planted, the little seedling trees. Of course, they need water right around the roots immediately. But the established orchard with deep roots in the soil, they've only been irrigated one time, and we're already into the middle of July.
That's amazing. And, for those people who criticize the orchards, water consumers, well, look, we can change that pattern of water consumption, particularly California. Right. That's a sensitive subject. So let's do better water rates that we can hold from the seasonal flooding. We can carry through to summer. We don't have to consume as much water. Let's go down pests, because you're clearly fixing the soil or you're fixing the product. Tell me about ecologically too, because you're creating abundance for nature, not just for us as humans.
They come back within a year. It's just amazing how quickly they repopulate.
So it's not like a journey. It's like you fixed it and they're here, right?
Oh yeah.
That's even better.
If you build it, they will come.
And they will not wait, apparently. I would think that would be like, oh, they take a while to find you. Well, that always is so crazy to me. It's not that we've eliminated the populations. We've just made them uninhabitable. They don't even want to be there. But as soon as we switch this habitat, they're like, oh, yay, we can come back.
So we've got, let me see if I can list all the predators that we have here. So we have owls, we have hawks, we have many species of birds that eat insects. We have snakes, we have gopher snakes, we have weasels. I love seeing those little bandits with their little, with their little bandit mask on and their sharp teeth. Coyotes are here. I mean, coyotes come around all the time. There's another species of bird that's not a predator. It's the ones that clean up the meat, the dead
vultures.
Meat. Anyway, so we kill squirrels and gophers. Mm-hmm. We just can't keep ahead of them otherwise. Gophers and squirrels do a lot of damage to our trees. The gophers will literally eat 10% of a newly planted orchard by killing by eating the roots, and they'll kill the trees. We've seen. There's a lot of there's a huge influx of wildlife here. They're doing their job. They're keeping the ecology of our farm in balance.
It's kind of nice to hear of a farm that embraces coyotes too, because we talk to a lot of livestock farmers, and obviously coyote is not the best friend of the livestock farmer, but
No.
that there are places that they do make ecological sense and they do have a purpose. So it's kind of nice to hear a different ecological balance rather than the coyotes ate 300 chickens overnight, right? So that's kind of nice to hear.
Yeah.
Anything you want to expand on the bat boxes or the owl boxes? Because those are really interesting.
Oh yeah, and they're we know they're doing their work because we can study the ground right around the owl boxes and the bat boxes for the residues of the gophers they're eating.
The owl pellets.
Owl pellets, they call them.
Wow. I didn't imagine them eating gophers. I was thinking mice and like smaller things, but I guess I didn't imagine that they were big enough to take on gophers. That's a lot.
Yeah, gophers is the number one food for owls.
Wow. All right. I learned something new today. Is there anything else high level that you want to share?
Taking care of the humans who are farming the land. So it's not just about maximum production, but it's also employing a team year round and having farm worker housing and maintaining a staff of folks that Al has had working here since the 80s, right? Like there's families
I've got people that are still here
here
after 35 years.
And that's very abnormal in your line of work, right? You guys usually deal with a lot more seasonal, but it's a whole different that you're employing people full time. And that's such a quality of life. Let's say you only work 3 months a year and the rest of the year you have no employment. So tell me a little bit about the quality of life for the people that you employ and like how you make that work.
They live here on the farm. So part of their quality of life is that they live where they work. They walk to work.
Yeah.
They love the land. They can enjoy the beauty of the land, and they can raise their families here in safety and comfort. They have to drive to the store, to town, to the store to get their food. That's not very far. That's only 3 miles from here. Fortunately, we're pretty close to it. I can think of at least 3 families that have their romances started as young people here on the farm, and they fell in love, got married, and are now raising their children here. Yeah, it's sustainable in more ways than one. In more ways than one.
That's that quality of life too. I think we all have this like drive to want to farm, and we kind of make it a little more magical. Like, it kind of has that filter of the internet. Like, oh, look how pretty it is. And we don't necessarily get to be in remember the time the rain was up to the tractor wheels and we were stuck and everybody was cussing at each other. Like there's not so much of that on the internet, but I think there's something very beautiful about like family and teams coming together to continuously work the land, which is different from the seasonal come in, fix my problem and then leave. So I think that's just such a like overall like nurturing, like better community style to go about it. And that you're able to financially sustain it also says something about the financial model in itself too.
Thank you.
So I will drop links and everything to your website. Everybody should go follow you on Instagram because you give out amazing tips like every week at this point about this kind of farming. So everybody should go check that out.
We do see ourselves as educators and teachers, and to young people who want to learn about who we are, what we do, why our food tastes so good. They want to come to the farm and they want to experience it. So we do this. We offer tours to anybody who wants a tour. And we have a relationship with a great outfit called Turning Green and Conscious Kitchen. And this is an organization in the Bay Area, Marin and Richmond. And they've got great programs teaching young, elementary age children how to cook and how to choose their food and how to grow their food. They've got gardens on their school grounds. And we go there and we give talks, we give demonstrations, we send gifts of food. And now we're even beginning to sell our summer fruit to their to the school lunch programs there. So this is another way that we're regenerative. We're actually building a knowledge and an understanding and an appreciation of regenerative agriculture.
I think that's amazing. And I have a little aside story is I brought some kids that were friends of friends from the city out to our farm that's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And we took them past an apple tree and we said, do you want an apple? And the kids said, no, we don't like apples. We don't eat apples. We don't consume them because they're from farms. And, we said, well, why don't you try them anyway? And half of them did, half of them said no. And the kids who said no, like eventually they started nibbling, like while we weren't watching, they started eating them. And by the time the kids had left, they had their pockets stuffed with all the apples they could find. And I said, "Oh, did you change your mind?" They're like, "Well, these don't taste like the apples that we have at home, right? Like these are different. These aren't really apples." So like regeneratively, right? Like we are creating a whole different food supply and kids don't even know that they like it. Like, so for something that helps kids learn how to even make food, because kids don't know how to cook anymore, adults don't know how to cook anymore, and learning to like love food again, and particularly food that's grown with such love. I feel like that's just, it's a tough area to like reinvigorate that love, but so important to do.
It's a cool part of what we do here. Yep. Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the fact that you appreciate us.
Back at you guys.